They claimed it was unbreakable. The intended terminus was the Alcatraz fortress, encircled by icy tides and strong currents. 3 men vanished, and the sea eventually found them. That was the simple story for decades, all for the time being. Something genuine and historical, however, has just lately emerged from hiding. Discoveries were made in the skeletal remains of the prison using state-of-the-art technology. Their findings have prompted us to pose some vital new inquiries. Would the most perilous escape attempt in American history have succeeded? What was lost in their absence? What was the rationale behind their secrecy? Frank Morris, the mastermind, was unique among inmates. He stood out as a unique character in the Alcatraz story due to his intelligence, discipline, and history of escaping. Rumor has it that Morris was very intelligent and strategic, with an IQ in the 130s. From the moment he arrived, he began plotting his next move, proving that he was more than just another prisoner attempting to survive. The Louisiana State Penitentiary had already released Morris. He had a knack for evading capture and had been a thief since his teenage years. The idea was that transferring him to Alcatraz, the most secure prison in the nation, would prevent him from escaping. Rather, it became the venue for his most famous and successful performance. Morris treated Alcatraz like a problem that needed solving. In contrast to impulsive escapees who relied on luck, there were holes in the prison's defenses and patterns in the guards' habits that he discovered. Also, he capitalized on the fact that people were more likely to be lazy after seeing Alcatraz because of its terrifying reputation. John and Clarence Anglin, who were compatriots, understood his desperation and discipline within weeks. They began plotting out a strategy that would occupy them for months as a group. Morris's leadership style included both strategic foresight and hands-on management. We all knew what to do and made decisions based on what would work best for the team as a whole. Examining Morris's skill in planning the escape is a terrific way to appreciate his abilities. A clandestine staging area was made possible thanks to his assistance in locating and utilizing the long unused utility corridor. Morris made air masks, oversaw tool production, and set up secret midnight work shifts for the benefit of others, giving meaning to things that could have been contained. This wasn't a daring prison break, it was a top-secret engineering operation. Morris's mind is more like a military strategist than a criminal's, because he can maintain order, focus, and secrecy despite knowing they could be discovered at any moment. Morris, as one of the jail history books, fails to grasp the fact that it was mental as well as physical. Because it would show that even the most flawless American organization is fallible, this ranks among the most cunning things the United States has ever witnessed. He is now wanted for a variety of crimes, including planning one of the most daring prison breaks in history. His strategy relentlessly chips away at the notion that escaping Alcatraz is an impossibility. It proves that even the most robust systems can be circumvented by determined individuals. What they accomplished behind closed doors will astound you, even though you are already aware of Morris's escape strategy. Behind the scenes of the escape, the daring escape from Alcatraz on June 11, 1962, was not carried out in a state of reckless desperation, but rather as a result of quiet collaboration, inventiveness, and creativity. Along with Frank Morris, the Anglin brothers managed to break out of not just any prison, but one of the most secure prisons in the world. Months of preparation went into the operation, which relied on strategy rather than force. After years of exposure to salt air, the cell walls were worn down, and the men began the dangerous and tedious process of tunneling through them. All they possessed were a couple of spoons, a few chisels that they had fashioned themselves, and a motor that had been salvaged from a vacuum cleaner. Using the crumbling concrete within the building as a weapon, the 3 men cautiously carved holes behind their cells' air grills. Every night, they would cover their work with boards and painted surfaces, so it would appear as though it had always been there. Hidden behind the walls was a small utility passageway, so they could move stealthily. Above this area, they uncovered a seldom utilized upper room that had previously served as storage. They planned to use this vacant room as a makeshift workshop, tucked away just above the heads of the guards. The 3 of them became experts at crafting escape mechanisms within their makeshift laboratory. They inflated a raft measuring 6 by 14 feet using 50 stolen raincoats. The steam line's heat formed the seals, which prevented water from entering and allowed the raft to float. Pants doubled as a life vest and an ungainly paddle. The designs allegedly originated from prison library records that documented inmates' exploits of prison resources for their own benefit. After each one was folded and tried out, it was stored until it was needed. At nightfall, everything proceeded according to plan, in a military-style fashion. Crawling through their cell walls, the men ascended the ventilation shaft, traversed the jail roof, and descended the extremely steep north side of the island. They descended to the water, detonated their raft, and vanished into the nighttime darkness of the bay. The fact that no guard detected them until morning roll call demonstrates how meticulously they planned each step. Their escape demonstrated not only their physical resistance, but also the power of intelligence and perseverance in the face of adversity. Most prison breaks include the use of physical force or diversions, such as the dummy head deception. Still, one of the most astounding aspects of the story is how realistic dummy heads were used to buy time during the 1962 Alcatraz breakout. Even with meticulous preparation, the Anglin brothers and Frank Morris were aware that an early alarm would render their plans useless. What did they say? Create convincing imposters so the guards won't notice they're missing until morning comes. Before anyone could begin searching for them, they obtained the necessary advantage to reach the water and escape. The craftsmanship and attention to detail in making the heads is truly remarkable. Soap, concrete dust, toilet paper, and actual human hair from the prison barber shop were used to create lifelike replicas of their own heads. In the low light that the nighttime bed checks were conducted in, the dummy subjects were made to appear realistic. The heads were meticulously positioned on the pillows and partially concealed by blankets to mimic the form and posture of a slumbering inmate. The tactic capitalized on the guards' inclination to depend on visual confirmation and routine rather than thorough examination. This fib was particularly effective because of the author's extensive knowledge of human nature and the relative ease with which institutions could implement it. While on night shifts, guards at Alcatraz were accustomed to ignoring minor infractions committed by prisoners. Employing this strategy in common human behaviors, the fugitives were able to breach the system designed to confine them. The following day, when the guards counted the heads, they discovered that the beds were vacant and that the heads were fake. The fugitives had been away for hours at that point, providing them with a strategic advantage that no material weapon could have replicated. Thus, the head dummy trick was more than a practical joke. It was an art form in the realm of psychological manipulation. This revealed a significant weakness in Alcatraz's typically robust security protocols. As a chilling reminder that the inmates improved the prison in more ways than one, the heads now rest in the Alcatraz Museum. This escape is one of the most cunning plans in the history of American prisons because it demonstrates the ingenuity of the escapees. Warning signs that cops flew over. The authorities hastily announced that Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers had drowned following the 1962 escape from Alcatraz. The conclusion was simple and maintained the myth that Alcatraz was inaccessible to anyone. However, tangible evidence began to emerge within days, disproving the veracity of this story. Debris from a makeshift raft along with wooden paddles and a plastic-wrapped wallet containing family photos and personal details of the Anglin brothers was discovered close to Angel Island and the Marin Headlands. If the fugitives had thought their escape route through, these spots would have been in the current's path. People started to doubt the official account of events as soon as they noticed the sequence in which these events occurred. According to oceanographers and forensic investigators, if the raft had broken apart early in the crossing, the pieces would have been pushed westward into the open Pacific Ocean instead of north toward shore. Things were instead discovered in locations that were reasonable choices for landing zones. Not only did the men cross the bay, but they might have landed precisely where they intended to, according to this. It appears that the wallet in particular was meant to be preserved rather than discarded, given how meticulously it was packed and stored. Inmates and law enforcement officials were unyielding in their refusal to budge from their previous decisions. According to them, the rubbish was a sign of failure rather than success, and those who made it out of the bay likely threw their tools overboard out of fear. In contrast, the meticulousness of the escape plan and the methods used to discover the objects were at odds with this level of explaining. When confronted with cold, hard facts, some agents with more knowledge than the general public cast doubt on the official narrative. No matter how incorrect the stance was, it would remain unchanged. Despite mounting evidence to the contrary, it clung to the famous tale that portrayed the institution in a positive light. Things that weren't given much weight initially started to carry more weight as time went on. Using cutting-edge technologies like LiDAR mapping and tidal simulations, the physical proof was examined in greater detail. As part of a larger conspiracy surrounding the escape, not only are the discarded items being examined closely, but also the preserved raft parts and wallet. There was an earlier attempt by the investigation to cast doubt on or minimize this evidence. The central argument now is that the Alcatraz jailbreak was not only feasible, but might have succeeded. That the story's voice can conceal physical proof, even when it surfaces later, is another way the evidence demonstrates this. Disguise or incompetence. Following the Alcatraz escape, the federal government acted swiftly, confidently, and perhaps even too routinely.
The 3 missing men were initially reported as drowning by the FBI, Coast Guard, and Bureau of Prisons upon learning of their disappearance. Seemingly more concerned with bolstering this preconceived notion than exploring other possibilities, despite the fact that search efforts were crystal clear. The authorities showed no signs of wanting to reconsider their decision, even when more and more proof emerged that suggested an improved outcome. Rather, the narrative was meticulously maintained. No one had infiltrated Alcatraz. A lot of work was done by the media to get the word out about what happened. Statements made by federal officials were the main focus of newspapers and radio stations. It was highly improbable that anyone would make it through the perilous, icy bay waters as depicted in these tales. Instead of seeing the things that were found as evidence of progress or achievement, they were frequently perceived as the tragic remnants of a failed attempt at evasion. Rumor has it that behind the scenes, a few investigators were having second thoughts about the story. It turns out that concerns were there almost immediately, but nobody ever told the public about them, according to interviews and records from later on. One of the primary things that could have inspired the story is reputation management. Symbolic of the federal government's absolute control and the impossibility of escaping, Alcatraz was more than just a prison. Discovering that 3 individuals managed to circumvent the system's most stringent security measures would have severely damaged public trust in it. In retrospect, a few of those officials have spoken about how they were pushed to hide any vulnerability. The urge to uncover the complete truth may have taken a back seat to instincts to preserve the institution's purported innocence. The official account lost credibility over the following decades due to its insistence on ignoring alternative theories. Many began to doubt the veracity of the drowning fiction when new technology and independent researchers unearthed secret rooms and artifacts that had been staged for other purposes. In today's world, many perceive the government storyline as an effort to conceal what is most likely true, that the inmates escaped and the system failed to notice the clear indicators for a long time. When it seemed like the official narrative couldn't be altered any further, scientists uncovered something unexpected. Under Alcatraz, Pete Kelsey made a revolutionary finding. In the year 2025, state-of-the-art technology finally unlocked the mystery of one of America's oldest prisons. Under the direction of digital imaging specialist Pete Kelsey, a team of researchers scanned Alcatraz Island in its entirety using 3D LiDAR technology. Forgotten architectural details that had been concealed for over 60 years were uncovered by this. The team created a digital map of the island using robotic rovers, drones, and laser scanners. This map revealed previously unknown chambers, tunnels, and hollow spaces. This altered the public's perception of the boundaries of an impenetrable stronghold. Among the most intriguing discoveries was a previously unrecorded entrance concealed behind a maintenance wall close to the cell block. Inside, divers discovered a patchwork of raincoat materials, some rudimentary flotation devices, and concrete floors marked with hand-carved navigational symbols. Angel Island appeared to be the destination of these lines and tide notes, the same possible escape route that law enforcement has considered for many years. Physical evidence connected the long-suspected workshop site to this area, which was directly above the cells housing the escapees, establishing that this was the final location seen of them before they vanished. Kelsey has recently been delighted by discoveries that have revealed the hidden corners of Alcatraz and how the prison's layout perplexed many inmates. Crawl spaces, blind spots, and unnoticed service tunnels connected each other in the supposedly impenetrable building. These weren't merely defects. An astute observer could locate escape routes. A crucial missing link in the jigsaw was the hidden room. It detailed a method the fugitives could have used to prepare their equipment covertly and conceal it in an obvious but secure location. LiDAR mapping challenged the Alcatraz myth, in addition to confirming long-held suspicions. The prison wasn't always a symbol of strength in history. The secrets of this intricate puzzle, which involved both human error and creativity, were guarded for generations. Thanks to Kelsey, everything is now crystal clear that 1962 escape wasn't just a possibility, it was supported by actual publicly observed infrastructure. What was once a myth now has scientific support. Some architectural historians have speculated that the original Alcatraz plans were either never digitized or lost, which adds another piece to the puzzle. Knowing this, I can't help but ask what else is lacking. In interviews, Kelsey even went so far as to say the island was more of a maze than a lockbox. This raises the possibility that the design of Alcatraz may have led to an escape, which was obviously not the intention. Truth Streams, the official account of the 1962 Alcatraz escape, relied on a single premise for a long time, that the surrounding water was too harsh, frigid, and merciless for any life to exist. The 1.5-mile swim across the icy, current-filled waters of San Francisco Bay was deemed impossible for anyone, according to authorities, let alone the 3 inmates on a makeshift raft. Based on this one, the theory that Frank Morris and the Anglin boys drowned was put forth. But as time went on, scientific evidence began to paint a different picture. The events of that fateful night in the bay were re-examined by forensic analysts and oceanographers using both historical data and modern modeling techniques. A CNN story from 2025 and later studies cited in Britannica both state that if the raft was launched by the escapees between 11:30 p.m., the tides would have been flowing directly toward Angel Island and the Marin Headlands at midnight, heading northeast. Despite expectations that the wind would have driven them farther out to sea, it would have actually aided their progress and increased the likelihood that they would survive the crossing. By simulating the tides and monitoring the temperature, this alternative scenario gained an additional advantage. Floating devices and training allowed the escapees to survive water temperatures of 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit for the most part. They most likely made life vests out of materials from raincoats to get their bodies ready to be out in the open. The escape was probably not a last-ditch effort to swim against bad weather, but rather a calculated effort to take advantage of favorable tide patterns, as suggested by the planned timing of the escape. Both the validity of long-held beliefs and the strength of the official narrative have been called into question by these facts. The concept of an impossible swim was built more on public reassurance and institutional pride than on actual evidence, and people have now come to understand this. The inmates who escaped never gambled with nature's forces. They knew how they worked. According to modern science, artifacts discovered off the coast and updated jail maps. This is an even more terrible truth. Drawing on their knowledge, they managed to remain alive in the bay while evading one of the most terrifying prisons in American history. There is a lot of weight in the existing theories, because modern open-water swimmers who have completed the same route in similar conditions have a high success rate. Similar to the swim from Alcatraz Island to San Francisco shore, an annual race called Escape from Alcatraz is held. It demonstrates that swimming the distance is doable with the correct equipment and dedicated training. In addition, Cox stated that, with the appropriate insulation and timing, such a swim would be difficult but far from impossible. These actual instances expose the fear industry's propaganda and demonstrate that the notion of an unbreakable water barrier is likely more theory than reality. Even though other people have crossed the bay before and after the escape, the psychological effect of making it sound dangerous helped maintain Alcatraz's terrifying reputation. Relics and encounters. Decades after the Alcatraz sirens had ceased sounding, shaky rumblings of survival began to circulate. The official story that Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers drowned persisted for quite a while after the 1962 escape. Still, across the U.S., and from all over the world, tales emerged from men who matched their descriptions. It wasn't only conspiracy theorists who thought these wild things. Some of these came from credible sources who disagreed with the government's verdict, such as the Anglin family, former neighbors, and police officers. Some of the most intriguing pieces of this puzzle were encoded messages. Strange holiday calls, unsigned notes, and even unaddressed letters appeared to be a sign that the brothers were alive and well for the Anglin family. Their certainty was based on the timing and tone of the messages, even though they did not reveal the identities of the escapees. According to Ken Widner, the Anglin brothers' nephew, there were clues in the messages that only the brothers would have known, hints that were too specific to be disregarded. The now famous photo, purportedly shot in Brazil in the 1970s, has aroused more curiosity than any other mystery. Standing beside a makeshift barn were two middle-aged men. John and Clarence Anglin were strikingly similar. For decades, the lack of solid evidence led many to believe the photo was random. It was that way until it was programmed to use cutting-edge facial recognition technology. According to forensic experts, there was a statistically significant match between the biometric features in the photo and those of Anglin's brothers. In terms of circumstantial evidence, this is among the strongest that we have encountered thus far. An excellent narrative concerning an escape that did not conclude in San Francisco Bay was created using sightings, personal messages, and science. Rather, it appeared as though the fugitives avoided capture for decades by living under false identities, possibly even in South America. Despite the lack of definitive evidence, such as DNA testing or an authenticated address, numerous other pieces of evidence continue to influence public opinion. There is so little dispersed but persistent evidence of life that the story of someone drowning and dying has died down. People are quite curious about the so-called reports because of their meteoric rise to fame in media and popular culture. The possibility that the escapees are still alive has been discussed in investigative podcasts, dramatized specials, and documentaries, elevating the case to the level of a modern legend. Both the BBC and the Investigative History Channel have aired documentaries revisiting the escape. As a result of this fresh interest, the evidence is once again being examined by both amateur detectives and professional researchers. That tales like the one about Alcatraz remain captivating demonstrates not only the fascination with the possible events that transpired there, but also the universal fascination with overcoming adversity, evading authority, and altering one's destiny. According to journalist Garrett M. Graff, some mysteries live on because we want them to. Deathbed confessions and hidden players. As time passed and individuals with connections to Alcatraz grew older, a new aspect of the escape story emerged, one that relied less on speculation and more on confession. Citizens, guards, and ex-inmates who had remained silent out of allegiance or fear started speaking up in their final years. In addition to providing evidence that Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers survived, their accounts suggested a grander, more deliberate scheme. Because of this, it's possible that people both inside and outside of prison were involved in the escape. A former inmate at Alcatraz made a particularly illuminating allegation when he claimed he had been asked to assist with the escape, but declined due to his fear of the consequences. He later came clean about his suspicions that the men might still be alive, attributing them to conversations he overheard in the days leading up to the breakout. Others who had worked in the prison system in the past have spoken out about how they were aware of infrastructure vulnerabilities that had been either overlooked or deliberately concealed by higher-ups. This points to a covert attempt to shield the prison's reputation from criticism rather than investigate the incident. A boat operator from the Bay Area finally spoke out after a long silence about how he was paid to wait offshore near Angel Island on the night of the escape. Undoubtedly, this was among the most startling bits of data. They handed him money and warned him not to probe. He remained silent for a long time out of fear of being associated with the crime. There may have been more than just a raft crossing the bay in the escapee's plans, according to his evidence, the escape timestamps, and new information. They might have also arranged to be picked up when their escape was over. If this witness's statements are accurate, it reveals far more external assistance and planning than has been previously stated. Following those remarks made in later years, a different narrative regarding this escape begins to take shape. It involves more than just 3 individuals using homemade tools. There is a conspiracy involving premeditated silence and assistance from the government. Although there is little evidence to support many of these claims, their frequency and proximity to one another lend credence to them. Additionally, I find myself questioning the extent to which the government was aware of the situation and the extent to which certain details were intentionally concealed. These statements from actual people further add emotional and political complexity to the Alcatraz escape, as new technologies uncover more physical clues. Suddenly it becomes a terrifying mystery of concealment and survival, transformed from an open case